Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam amma ba'd. To continue in the study of Nukhbatul Fikr of Hafidh ibn Hajr rahimahullah. Last week we took Al-Mutawatir and Ahad. What is Al-Mutawatir narration? The scholars have mentioned. What is the Mutawatir narration? Yes. No, something that comes from so many routes that it's impossible for those who are related to agree upon a lie. And Ahad, we mentioned there's three types of them. What is the first one? Mashhur. How many narrators in the least amount of narrators in the chain? 3. The second is Aziz. And how many is in that? 2. And the last one is Al-Gharib. And how many in that? 1. So we gave homework last week to mention regarding what are some of the factors that the scholars of hadith have mentioned that ahad narrations yufidul ilm. They benefit knowledge. And we mentioned that this is the correct stance, that if there are side factors or side affairs that indicate for it to yufidul ilm, to benefit knowledge, that's the correct stance. Number one, from those side factors is that the hadith we reported in Bukhari and Muslim. The hadith we reported in Bukhari and Muslim. For the scholars have met these two books with acceptance. The scholars have met Al-Bukhari and Muslim with acceptance. They've accepted that which is in these two books of hadith. Also, they mention from that which indicates this is that it be from that which is mashhur. If it has different routes, free from weak narrators, and any hidden defects, it benefits knowledge, yufidul ilm. Number 3, they also mention is that the chain be full of continuously full of narrators which are strong. So the chain have narrators in that hadith, or the routes of the chains are full of narrators that are strong. And this was part of the reason why I gave this homework with the hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والدي وولده. One, because this hadith is what? Which category does it fall to from ahad? Aziz. So لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والدي وولده is Aziz. Meaning the least amount you'll find in any of the routes, the chains of the narration is 2. So this is ahad narration. But it benefits knowledge. Why? Because it's found in Bukhari and Muslim from the hadith of Anas. And it's found in Bukhari from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. Secondly, I asked you brothers to look at the narrators that are found in this hadith. The narrators which are found in this hadith, as we mentioned from Anas ibn Malik, we mentioned the chains of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh. The first one to narrate from Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh this hadith was Qatada. If you go to the book Taqrib, At-Tahdhib, you would have found Qatada, some of them were Sahaba. We weren't looking for the Sahabi. You're looking for the tabi'i that relate from Anas ibn Malik, which is Qatada ibn Di'amah as-Sadusi, rahimahullah. What did Hafidh ibn Hajr say about him? Thiqatun thabt. He is trustworthy and firm. That is a ta'dil, a praise, which is one of the highest forms of praise. Then you're to look at who relayed the hadith from Qatada, who was Sa'id ibn Abi Aruba, rahimahullah. And if you're to look into that part of the hadith, or that part of the book, you'll say thiqatun hafidh, trustworthy and a memorizer of hadith. But at the end of that he says, وَكَانَ مِنْ أَثْبَتِ النَّاسِ فِي Qatada. He was one of the most firm and trustworthy narrators when he narrated from Qatada, regards to Qatada. What does that show? This shows the last part of what we mentioned, that if the chain is full of narrators that are trustworthy and strong in memorization and firm in their memorization, that this is one of the affairs that strengthen the hadith to yufidul ilm. This was the part of the exercise, the benefit of the exercise. You're to understand this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, and this hadith has these narrators. Example, from those narrators in this hadith was Abdul Aziz ibn Suhaib. He says regarding thiqah, trustworthy. But the one after him, Shu'bat ibn Hajjaj, he said regarding him, who Amir al-Mu'mineen fi hadith. He is the leader of the believers in al-hadith. Thiqatun hafidh mutqin. He is a thiqah, trustworthy, and a hafidh, memorizer of hadith. So the point of that exercise was that you're to understand that there are side factors that will benefit al-ilm in some of these ahad narrations, and from them were strong narrators. And you looked at biographies of 4 of those narrators who were strong in their narrations. Similarly, another benefit regarding that homework was for you to be accustomed to a book of hadith, ar-rijal, men. Many of us have never looked into a book of men. We have never opened up a book of Jarh wa Ta'dil. If you were to ask someone, have you ever opened up a book of Jarh wa Ta'dil? He'll say no. So this was a way for you to finally look into a book of Jarh wa Ta'dil. Taqrib al-Tahdhib by Ibn Hajr rahimahullah is from the best books for a beginner student of knowledge to benefit from. Imam Al-Albani rahimahullah, he mentions in some of his fatawa, he said, تقريب التهذيب للحافظ المذكور آنفا هو الأسقلاني كتاب تقريب التهذيب يمكنني أن أقول إنه أصح أو أهم كتاب ينبغي أن يرجع إليه طالب هذا العلم. He says regarding تقريب التهذيب that I see that it is the most authentic or the best, most important book that is befitting for a student knowledge to return to in this knowledge. This book, تقريب التهذيب, mentions 8,900 plus narrators. 8,900 plus narrators. Al-Hafidh ibn Hajr rahimahullah, what he did was, he took the book of Al-Mizzi and he summarized it in Tahdhib al-Tahdhib. He summarized it, Tahdhib al-Tahdhib. After that, he took that book and he summarized it to Taqrib al-Tahdhib. He summarized that book to Taqrib al-Tahdhib. Al-Mizzi is the father-in-law of Al-Dhahabi. Al-Mizzi is the father-in-law of Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah. This book, Taqrib al-Tahdhib, also from the benefits of it is that it summarizes the statements of the scholars regarding this narrator in 1 or 2 lines. In 1 and 2 lines. That's why it's extremely beneficial for you to be accustomed to this book. For that reason, Imam Muqbil rahimahullah, he says that no one is able to author a book like Taqrib after Ibn Hajr. No one is able to author a book like Taqrib after Ibn Hajr. Because it is a work of Ibn Hajr which is great. And he says, at times when it becomes hard upon me to understand the statements of the scholars regarding a narrator, I go back to Taqrib al-Tahdhib and look at the wording he used. And I go by that. Showing us the importance of Taqrib al-Tahdhib. So the one who starts studying the science of hadith and wants to check narrations, he'll go first and foremost to Taqrib al-Tahdhib. He'll go to Taqrib, you'll see the narrators mentioned that chain, and he'll start to practice. This one is thiqah, this one is da'if, this one is suduq, this one is this, lahu awham, and other than that. So that was the homework and the benefits regarding why we gave that homework. Then he mentions, as for al-gharaba, uniqueness in the narration, it can be either in the root of the chain of narration or not. The first type is called fard al-mutlaq. Al-fard al-mutlaq. What does this mean? That is absolutely unique. This is a narration where a particular narrator is the only one narrating this hadith. Meaning, fard al-mutlaq means it is narrated by a single companion. It is narrated by a single sahabi. What does that mean? Example, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. Which sahabi narrated? Umar Khattab. If someone comes to you today and says, there's a hadith an Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. What do you say to him? This is ignorance. Because a hadith is only authentic from one sahabi, and that is Umar Khattab. For that reason, that hadith is fard al-mutlaq. Al-fard al-mutlaq. Absolutely unique. Absolutely unique. The second type of al-fard is fard al-nisbi, meaning it is relatively unique. This uniqueness could occur in parts of the chain. For example, it is said that this narration goes back to so-and-so narrator, meaning that specific narrator goes back to him by way of his route. Also, it could be that it's specific to a certain land. You'll find some hadith is narrated only from scholars from Ash-Sham, from scholars from Syria, for example. Or some hadith will be only narrated from scholars of Egypt. You'll find that some of the books of hadith that don't mention this, that this chain is the chain of Ash-Shamiyin, the chain of the Syrians, for example. Then he mentions the ahad reports that have been narrated and then he mentions the 5 conditions for sahih. Now we're going to go into the 5 conditions of sahih. The reason why I mentioned ahad, because we mentioned mutawatir, the scholars, if they've labeled the hadith to be mutawatir, the scholars of hadith, then it cannot be that they agreed upon a lie. I mean, the hadith is authentic. So when they talk about checking these narrations, they talk about the ahad narrations that they're checking. So the first condition of ahad, or the first point of a sahih narration, or the scholars mention the conditions of it is that the narrators will be adil. The narrators have adalah. They're trustworthy and pious narrators. They're trustworthy and pious narrators. Number 2, that they have ad-dabt. They're precise in their memory or in their writing. They're precise in their narrations, whether that be in their memory or in their writing. Number 3, that the chain of narration from the beginning to the end of it be connected. Ittisal sanad. The chain from the beginning to the end of it be connected. Number 4, that there's no illa qadiha. There is no hidden defects that harm the narration. And number 4, there's no shadh. Ashadh, which means irregular. And we're going to explain in detail these 5 points. But then he says, if these 5 conditions are met, the narration is sahih li dhatih. Sahih in of itself. Sahih by itself. And the strength of these narrations varies with the strength of the different factors that have come regarding them. For that reason, Sahih al-Bukhari takes precedence over Sahih Muslim. Then the narrations that meet the criteria set by both of them. Now I'll explain in detail what he's mentioning here. First and foremost, the narrations which are accepted are 4 categories. 4 categories. The first one is Sahih li dhatih. Sahih by itself. This is the highest form of as-sihha, the highest form of authenticity. Sahih li dhatih. It is authentic by itself. Why? Because it's met those 5 conditions that we just mentioned. It's met those 5 conditions that we just mentioned. Number 2 is sahih li ghayrihi. Sahih due to support of others. Authentic due to support of others. Meaning there is some deficiency found in the chains or in the narration. And then when you support the different routes together, it goes to being sahih. I will clarify that next week, inshallah, in further detail. The next one is hasan li dhatih. Hasan on its own. A narration which cannot go to the level of sahih, but it is hasan on its own. And number 4, I will mention that next week as well, because that's what he mentions next point when we start next week. Number 4, if there is weakness present and it can be strengthened due to different factors, then it's called hasan li ghayrihi. Hasan by other than it, by supporting routes. What that means is narration which is da'if, a narration which has weakness to it. And then due to that weakness, it is not excessive or extreme weakness. It supports one another and becomes hasan by way of supporting routes. And this will all become clear later on when we study further in this book. And obviously, these are the 4 categories of as-sihha, authenticity. Anything other than that is da'if. Anything other than these 4 is considered da'if. Al-adl, what does it mean to have al-adala? Or the narrator to have, or to the narrator, for the narrator to be al-adl. Al-adl is he who is just. He is Muslim, he is of age, he is sane, he is not an open sinner, nor does he have bad manners and bad habits. Ibn Hajr went further to say that this individual stays away from shirk, innovations, and fisk, and evil indecencies. Now some scholars, they say that in reality what it is the one whose heart, the one who you feel when he narrates to you, your heart feels tranquil with his narration or his report, and you're at ease with what he has relayed, that is al-adl. Meaning you're at ease with what he reports and what he's relayed. Ibn Qayyim also mentioned a benefit. Some people, they have misunderstanding. They think al-adala means the person doesn't commit any sins. That does not mean that adala does not mean that a person doesn't commit any sins. كل بني آدم خطاء وخير خطائين التوابون. All of the children of Adam will make mistakes, and the best of those who make mistakes are those who repent. For that reason he mentions, one may be mistaken what he calls al-adala, whereas some believe it means he is the one who doesn't sin at all. And it is not as so. Rather, it is one who is trusted in his religion, even if he has some affairs that he has to repent to Allah for. Since this does not negate al-adala, the same way it does not negate iman and al-wilaya. Meaning someone is a sinner, doesn't mean he's not wali of Allah. Man kana mu'minan taqiyan, kana lillahi waliyan. The one who is a believer and pious, he is a wali, friend of Allah. Now that friendship could be in different levels. Similarly, al-adala has different levels. The next one is dabt. Precision could be of the heart and of the book. Not everyone is strong in their memorization. Some people have to write down. So the precision of the heart is that he makes firm that which he has heard, whereas he is able to mention it whenever he wants and needs. Whenever you want to mention what you memorize, you're able to mention it. Some of the scholars, they have mentioned that dabt al-sadr, the memorization of the heart, or memorization means whenever it's sought from you, you have to relate what is sought from you. But that's not correct. Because a person's mind might not be there, and he won't be able to relate at times what he has memorized, although his memorization of it is strong. For that reason, they say, what is the correct stance regarding it is that whenever he wants to relate, he's able to relay it from his memory. The Dabt al-Kitab, the precision of the book, is that he preserves the book from the time he heard it, and he corrects it, and this is all done until he relays it correctly. Meaning that which is written is correct, and he's heard it he's written exactly as he's heard it, until he relays it exactly how he's heard it. So showing us some scholars, they had Dabt al-Kitab, they were good when it came to their book, but when it came to the memorization, they were weak. This occurs, you'll find in some of the narrators of hadith, that when it came to Dabt al-Sadr, the precision of their memorization was weak. But if they relayed from their book, it was trustworthy and authentic. The next one, the condition that he mentions, a connected chain. Meaning there is no drops in the chain. All the narrators of the chain took it directly from the one he is narrating from the start of the chain until the end of the chain. Number four, there is no hidden defects or weakness, which is a non-apparent factor which affects the authenticity of the hadith, whilst what is apparent is that the narration is free from it. As we mentioned, all this will come more detailed, but these are the 5 conditions of authentic hadith. Number 5, it is no shudud, there's no irregularities. Ashad means mukhalafatul maqbul liman huwa awla min. A acceptable narrator opposing those who are more trustworthy than him, whether that is sifatan in his characteristics or adadan in number. So if you find a reliable narrator opposing those who are more trustworthy than him, it is called shadh. If you find a da'if narrator opposing those who are trustworthy, it's not called shadh. It's called munkar. It's called a rejected narration. Understand that not everyone that opposes is called shadh. If a weak narrator opposes those who are trustworthy, it's called munkar. But if a maqbul narrator opposes those who are trustworthy, it is called shadh. Now an example of sahih li dhatihi, sahih by itself, is a narration of Bukhari. And this is one the narration one of the scholars mentioned. If I mentioned this specific one, it comes from Iyas ibn Salama ibn al-Aqwa, that my father was amongst those who had given the pledge of allegiance to the Prophet beneath the tree. He said to me, we used to offer the Jummah prayer with the Prophet ﷺ and then depart at a time when the walls had no shade for us to take shelter in. This chain comes, حدثنا يحيى بن يعلى المحاربي قال حدثني أبي, meaning يعلى المحاربي. حدثنا إياس بن سلمة ابن الأكوع قال حدثني أبي, meaning Salama ibn al-Aqwa. This is a chain of narration. Each narrator heard from the one before him and related exactly how he heard it from the one before him, until they narrated the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, the strength of narrations of Sahih li-Dhati differ. Some narrations are more stronger than others, due to factors that the scholars have mentioned. For example, some of the scholars have mentioned that this chain is the most authentic chain, for example, from this Sahabi. So if it comes from this chain to this Sahabi, this is more authentic than the one that comes from a different chain. Example, if you see Az-Zuhri and Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar and Abihi, this is a chain which the scholars have considered one of the most authentic chains. So Zuhri narrates from Salim, the son of Ibn Umar, and he narrates from his father, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Similarly, if you see Muhammad ibn Sirin from Abida ibn Amr, As-Salmani from Ali, this is from the most authentic chains as well. And other than that, from Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, from Al-Qama and Ibn Mas'ud. If you memorize these chains, these small 3 chains, or chains like this, if you go to a book of hadith and look at it, you'll find that these chains are often mentioned. Why? Because these are from the great students of the Tabi'in and the Sahaba, Zuhri, Muhammad Sirin, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. You'll find Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, rahimahullah, often mentions the stances of Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu. Now there's chains which are lesser than this. So if you find the first chain, it is more authentic than the second chain. Not saying that they're not hadith sahih li-dhatih, but they're more authentic. For example, Hammad ibn Salama and Thabit and Anas is lesser in level than these chains previously mentioned. Now, or the fact it could be that, example, the narration is found in Bukhari and Muslim, and the other one is found in only Bukhari, or it's only found in Sahih Muslim. This is a factor that shows this chain, this hadith is more authentic than the other one. Now, he mentions that Sahih Bukhari is more authentic or given precedence over Sahih Muslim. This is the correct stance of the scholars. That Bukhari is given precedence in authenticity over Sahih Muslim. And those of scholars that have mentioned Sahih Muslim is better or more authentic is a weaker stance. But Imam Muslim, as we mentioned before, they say تشاجر قوم في البخاري ومسلم. The people they argued regarding Bukhari and Muslim. لدي وقالوا أي ذين تقدموا. Regarding them, they said, which one should we put forth? Bukhari or Muslim? فقلت لقد فاك البخاري صحة كما فاك في حسن صناعة مسلم. Bukhari is more authentic, but Muslim was written in a better order. Muslim was written in a better order. Muslim was written in a better way. But Bukhari is more authentic. The reason why they say Bukhari is more authentic, because his condition of authenticity was more strict. This is stuff that is important for you to understand. Because you'll find people that will bring doubts regarding Bukhari and Muslim. So it's important for Ahlul Sunnah to understand these benefits regarding the science of Hadith. Al-Bukhari, his condition was that each narrator must have met the narrator he's narrating from. Each narrator must have met the narrator he's narrating from. Whereas Muslim said that so long as they're in the same time period, ma'alim kan al-luki, that they're able to meet one another, it is sufficient. As long as you're in the same time period, and there's a possibility that you met, it is enough for him. But Bukhari said no. You have to have confirmed or affirmed that you met this narrator before you narrated from him. So this condition obviously shows that Bukhari was more stricter in the narrations that he narrated. Similarly, the narrators that were spoken about in Sahih Bukhari are lesser than those in Sahih Muslim. There's other reasons as well. But nonetheless, what is sufficient for you to know now is that Bukhari is more authentic than Sahih Muslim. That does not mean that every single hadith in Bukhari is more authentic than every single hadith in Sahih Muslim. That just means, in a general sense, Bukhari is more authentic than Muslim. Then we'll mention the levels of a Sahih narration in a general sense. These are all benefits. If you're to memorize these benefits, they come in every book of science of Hadith. It's important to memorize these benefits. They come in every book of science of Hadith. The levels of Sahih narration are as follows. That which Bukhari and Muslim agree upon are the most authentic. That which Bukhari and Muslim agree upon, you see muttafaqun alayh. Or example, you say akhrajo shaykhan. The two shaykhs, meaning Bukhari and Muslim, they're related. This is the best form of authenticity. Number two, that which Bukhari reported alone. That which Bukhari reported alone. Number three, that which Muslim reported alone. So first is what Bukhari and Muslim reported. Second, in authenticity, is what Bukhari reported alone. Number three is what Muslim reported alone. Number four, that which fulfills both of their conditions. That which fulfills both of their conditions, but they didn't report it. It fulfills their conditions, but they didn't report it. Number five, that which fulfilled the condition of Bukhari. Number six, that which fulfilled the condition of Muslim. And number seven, that which is authenticated by others and does not fill the condition of one of them. Does not fill the condition of one of them. These are the 7 levels of authenticity. You'll find these in every book of science of Hadith. Now there's a benefit. Bukhari and Muslim, their condition was not to relate every single Sahih Hadith. Say people, they have a misunderstanding. You'll say to them, they say Bukhari relate every Sahih Hadith. Muslim relate every Sahih Hadith. That is a misunderstanding some of the awam, the general folk, they have. Ibn Salah, rahimahullah, he mentions that he relates from Bukhari, rahimahullah, that we have relayed from Bukhari, that I have not entered in my book Al-Jami' except that which is authentic. And I have left off from different authentic narrations so that the book is not made long. Hisham Bukhari himself is telling you that he didn't relate every hadith which is authentic. Rather, he sufficed with some of them, so he didn't relate all of them because the book would have been too long. Similarly, Imam Muslim said, I have not placed in this book, Sahih Muslim, every narration that is authentic with me. Rather, I have only placed here that which they have agreed upon. That which they have agreed upon. So today we've understood that narrations that are Sahih li dhati, Sahih in of itself, have 5 conditions. What are those 5 conditions? What's the first one? Connected chain. You must have a connected chain. What's another condition? You must be a just upright narrator. Al-Adala. You must have Adala. Does that mean it doesn't commit any sins? No, it doesn't mean it doesn't commit any sins. Next one. Ad-Dabt. What are the 2 forms of precision? As-Sadr. What does that mean? In the heart. And what's the next one? Written. Kitaba. What's the next condition? So these 3 are al-wujudiyah. They must be present. The next 2 are called shurut al-adamiyah. Conditions which conditions that cannot be present. They must not be present. What are they? Illa, but when you say illa, you have to say illatun qadiha. Because not every hidden defect in the hadith actually harms the narration. For example, if you see Amr ibn Dinar relays and Abdullah ibn Dinar narrates, they're both thicker narrators. Whether this one is mentioned, that one's mentioned, it doesn't harm the narration, for example. We'll come to that later on. But you show when you say illah, you must say illatun qadiha. A illah which attacks the authenticity of the narration. The next one is, the last one, shadh. What does shadh mean? Opposes those who are more trustworthy. Other than whether that is in number or sifatan, whether that is in is characteristics. Another benefit or another point I want to ask about, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. What are the levels of a sahih narration? The 7 levels we mentioned. What is the most authentic of narrations? Muttafaqun alayhi. Bukhari, Muslim narrates. What's the next one? What Bukhari narrates alone? What's the next one? Muslim. And the next one? Upon the conditions, and they didn't report it. And then the next one? Condition of Bukhari. And the next one? And then the last one? That which is authentic and doesn't meet their condition but is authentic from others' cause. The next point is, what are the 4 levels of authentic narration? The first one is Sahih lidhatihi. What does that mean? In of itself. The next one? Sahih li ghayrihi. The next one? Hasan what? Hasan lidhatihi. Hasan by itself. And the next one? Hasan li ghayrihi. Which book is more authentic, Bukhari or Muslim? What was the condition of Bukhari? Every narrator must what? Have met the one he narrates from. And what was the condition of Imam Muslim? They be in the same time with the possibility of meeting one another. Imam Muslim didn't intend. Some of the scholars, they've mentioned that they be in the same time. And other scholars, they've criticized that statement. We're saying you must add ma'al imkan al-luqi. There must be a possibility that met. Imam Muslim didn't mean just in the same time period. What he intended was there must be a possibility that they have, there's a possibility they may have met. So now we'll stop with this, inshallah. Our homework for next class is as follows. It's simple. There are 6 books of hadith that the scholars have mentioned, the kutub al-sittah, the 6 books of hadith. You're going to have to identify these 6 books of hadith. For the scholars, and agree upon all these 6 books of hadith. For example, I mentioned one of them, some of them say Ibn Majid is not from them. They say Ad-Darimi is from them. But you have to mention the correct stance regarding the 6 books of hadith. What are the 6 books of hadith? And then the order of the authenticity of them. The order of the authenticity of those 6 books of hadith. If there's any question, we'll take now. If not, we'll continue next week. Yes.